Welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast, hosted by the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. We provide you with up-to-date information on health topics geared towards the Orthodox Jewish community. This podcast content is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician.
Welcome to the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association, or JOMA podcast. I'm your host, Elisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and proud JOMA member. And tonight I'm really honored and really excited to be interviewing Sara Chana Silverstein. If you have topics you want to hear, you want to be interviewed, you know someone who you want to hear interviewed, or you have comments about podcasts I've done, please reach out to us at health, HEALTH, @joma.org. We want to hear from you. And tonight's guest, Sara Chana Silverstein, was suggested by one of our listeners. Thank you. Very excited to be interviewing her tonight. Sara Chana Silverstein is a master herbalist and international board-certified lactation consultant. She is a keynote speaker at medical conferences across the U.S. She does TV shows, podcasts, and radio shows across the U.S. and internationally, teaching people how to safely integrate botanical medicine, also called herbal medicine, with conventional medicine. Her specialty is using botanicals to help with emotional health for women and for children. She can be reached at Sara Chana S, SARACHANAS, on Instagram. She can be found at moodtopiabook.com and be reached by Gmail at moodtopiabook@gmail.com. I'm going to also comment that I'm really trying to reach out to non-traditional practitioners like Sara Chana. I am doing this from the perspective of traditional evidence-based mainstream medicine, but with an open mind and curiosity. Again, this does not constitute medical advice. Please consult with your personal healthcare professional. Welcome, Sara Chana. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Dr. Minkin. It's such an honor.
And I have to say, I'm so excited that you're doing this with me. I have been waiting so long for this, and I am so excited. I have to say, first of all, that this podcast was requested by one of our listeners, and I get really excited when that happens because I'm really trying to listen to my audience and respond. I had done a previous episode with a homeopath named Rivka, who's phenomenal, and I called it, I think, joining together on the path to healing or something like that. I think it's really important to build bridges between what we call traditional, allopathic, or mainstream medicine and other types of medicine or healing. So here you are. And one of the main things you're known for is being an herbalist. And I would love it if you could start by telling us about what herbal or botanical medicine is, because I know lots of us, including most all doctors, don't know.
Right. So botanical or plant-based medicine means that we take a plant, either the root, the leaf, the stem, the seed, the flowers. We immerse it in a grain alcohol. We let the plant matter sit in the grain alcohol for 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the plant. The alcohol or vinegar or glycerite, we can use different mediums, will break down the components of the plant. We strain it, and then we have plant-based medicine. So basically, there's 2 ingredients, maybe 3 if we first make the medicine in an alcohol, a grain alcohol, and then we might infuse it in a glycerite, especially for pediatrics. So we are taking pure plant-based medicine. What's phenomenal about plant-based medicine is that, from my understanding, the brain will read the plant as food because it's a food item, and it will take what it needs and dispels what it doesn't. I'm not using any toxic or poisonous plants. I mean, we can discuss that later, but basically the plants that we use are all edible. And what they do is they encourage the body to balance itself. For instance, if a person is constipated, we know they need roughage in their system. So we give them some iceberg lettuce, we give them some romaine lettuce, we give them some arugula, and all of a sudden they start stooling regularly. Somehow it starts to move the stools. There's a peristaltic movement in the intestines, and they're no longer constipated. So the question is, how is it doing it? Because the plant knows how to heal the intestines. So the fabulous thing about plant-based or botanical medicine is that in the plants that I use, especially again with pediatrics and women's health, are non-toxic. My clients have never overdosed on them. They will find what dosage works for them, especially psychologically. If I'm working with a woman that's having some emotional stress, a little sadness, anxiety, and I give her an herb, for instance, called skullcap, which is an herb phenomenal. It's in the mint family. When she starts to take that herb, it will enter her bloodstream within 20 minutes. And she, after a week or two, will tell you, it works, it doesn't work. I felt like I needed to take a little more of the herb. Like I'll give them a little limit of between 25 and 45 drops, and they feel better. And their anxiety levels decrease and their cortisol levels lower. So that's plant-based medicine. So the root of a plant has a different action in the body than the flower. And the flower of the plant may have a different action than the seed. And sometimes, for instance, with echinacea, we can use the whole plant. So with the plant echinacea, which is an immunomodulator, it's not true that you have to go on echinacea for a couple of weeks off. It's not just an immune stimulant. We see it as an immunomodulator. So we can use it with someone that has eczema, that has an overactive immune system, and we can use it for someone that's getting chronically strep throat. We can also use it then. So the root is the major action. It's a plant that we harvest in the fall. A lot of plants we harvest in the spring, some in the summer. Echinacea is a fall plant because we want that root. We want it to go through its season inside the ground. But we're also finding that if we also include the flowers and the leaves, we can get an even stronger or more action-packed herb.
That's fascinating. I have so many questions. Are you ready for me?
Of course.
This is awesome. I heard you on a podcast. I couldn't remember the name of it, but you were so awesome. And thank you so much for doing this with me. So let's go back a little bit. First of all, I think that, some people might say, well, that's just like not medicine. It doesn't work. And so I definitely want to hear what you say to people who think that. But I'm also going to add that people may think, well, since it doesn't do anything, it doesn't matter what I take it with.
So I would say to call some of the over 45,000 clients that I've seen over the last 30 years and see whether they think it works. So the really amazing thing is that when we combine traditional allopathic medicine with complementary herbal medicine, and we have a practitioner that's willing to work with us, we're going to get a strep test. They're going to test positive. I always tell them, fill your antibiotic, have it in the house. Then let's try some botanical medicine and retake the strep test to see if it goes away. So some people will say, well, maybe it'll self-resolve anyway, so maybe the herbs are doing nothing. But I have clients, especially children, that have had 10 strep throats in 4th grade, 10 strep throats in 5th grade, and now they want to take out their tonsils. And the mother's like, well, wait a minute. Like, it seems like the antibiotic takes it away, but it's coming right back. And I say, look, let's speak with the doctor and see if he'll give us 6 months. And when they take botanical medicine, the strep goes away. They keep their tonsils and they don't get strep again. Now, they can get an occasional sore throat, but they have their herbal mix right there to take. So I have proof. I mean, I don't have the double-blind clinical studies yet. There's a lot of research. The NIH has a whole page on their website that talks all about botanical medicine. Actually, in Iran right now, they're doing phenomenal double-blind clinical studies on herbal medicine. So slowly but surely, the research is there. But for me as an individual practitioner, when I see a kid on a lab having strep, testing positive 20 times in 24 months, and we do a throat culture, We know in the blood we're still going to see strep for a while. It takes a while for that to resolve. But in a culture, they stop getting strep. I also have a lot of ladies that come to me with gallstones. They get a terrible gallstone attack during the middle of their pregnancy. The end of their pregnancy, they get a terrible gallstone attack. And the doctors, the OBs are like, let's take out that gallbladder. And I'm like, oh, give us a little bit of time. And they see that the gallstones slowly but surely resolve. The body reabsorbs them. They actually break down, become in a more powdered form. And they stop having gallbladder attacks. Yes, we have to talk about their diet. Yes, we have to talk about, are they taking the hormonal pill, birth control pill? What's going on? But I see in my office people, this is how I became popular, because people would use traditional medicine. They would put their heart and soul into it. They wouldn't get better. And then before surgeries, they'd come and they'd give us a shot and they get better. So that's how I know botanical medicine works. And for 5,700 years, strep throat is not new. We've had it. As a matter of fact, when I first became an herbalist, everybody in England, they didn't call it strep throat. They called it tonsillitis. So they didn't even do strep cultures. They called it tonsillitis. So this is not a new thing. Fluid in the ear is not a new thing. So people for thousands of years went to their midwife who was in town, and she would have herbs that could increase bleeding. If a woman wasn't getting a strong enough menstrual cycle, we have herbs that decrease bleeding. We have herbs that can help you sleep. We have herbs that can keep you more awake during the day. So this is not new medicine. I call it wise wisdom healing for the modern woman. So we're taking what's been used for generations and trying to help educate the modern woman with things that have been used for a very long time.
Yeah, I like that. First of all, one thing I like is how you're talking about how you work together with mainstream medicine. I think that there's unfortunately people who don't trust mainstream medicine, and then they go to alternative, but they're not working at the same time. But here you're talking about working together, and there's so much we don't know.
I love working together. I'm also a lactation consultant in IBCLC. And unfortunately, my breast surgeon retired without asking my permission, of course. But he was this guy in Midtown Manhattan. And one of his clients got a diagnosis that they had an abscess in their breast. He was actually going out of town for the weekend. And she came to me throughout the weekend, and I gave her some homeopathic remedies because I'm also a classical homeopath. And she went back for the procedure, let's say on a Tuesday after the weekend. And he called me and said, oh my gosh, the abscess is half the size. It's risen. So it's right under the skin, whereas it was in the tissue deep. He said, this is the easiest abscess to aspirate that I've seen in a very long time. And I want to tell you a very fascinating story. I was young and dumb, a new lactation consultant.
Wait. Before you go to the new story, one second. Can we stick on that other story? You're going a little too fast.
Sure.
For me.
Sure.
What I love again about that story is you worked together.
Yes.
You worked together. You did literally complementary together medicine. Right. I just want to point that out here. I want to point that out here. And it's just what I was wondering whether you did is whether you worked together. And I know you do it. I was trying to bring it out that you work together. You have this reputation where you work together with mainstream physicians. And that I love that so much. You can get to your story. There was something else I wanted to say first about that. Oh, I just wanted to point out before you get to it, I thought you were also going to say that herbal medicine is practiced all over the world. 80% of the world uses herbal medicine. 80%. Yes. So I think that doctors often don't know that. They don't always ask, and people don't always tell. And so I think this is such an important conversation we're having. I'm going to let you get back to that story though. Sorry.
I will tell the story in a minute, but on that note, I think one of the problems we're having, honestly, is that, and I don't want to toot my own horn because maybe I'm a little OCD compulsive, but like I did 2,500 clinical hours as a lactation consultant before I sat for my exams. I did a 5-year classical homeopathic program. I did a 3-year herbal apprentice program where we did over 1,000 clinical hours. So, and I was explaining to you before our discussion, our podcast began, was that as a homeopath, it's a 5-year program. We do anatomy and physiology. We do disease progression. We have to learn are the pharmaceuticals, the actions of the pharmaceuticals. We have to take an emotional intake, emotional and psychological intake. We have to know the compliance, what their medical history is. Like when someone comes into me, I ask about their parents, their grandparents, their first cousins, because we know that there is a genetic DNA predisposition for certain diseases. And once I get that, then I'm going to ask them, are they sleeping? Are they eating? Are they exercising? Before I even think of a botanical suggestion, I take an hour and a half, and I know that MDs don't have that luxury. I mean, I feel like an hour and a half is not enough time. I'm always panicking that I have to do it in an hour and a half. That means that I get an hour of listening, 15 minutes of doing my research, but the whole time I'm thinking in my brain, and then 15 minutes to teach them how to use botanicals. And it's not enough time for me. So this is how I learned how to take a case. So it's not just, hey, take some echinacea. Oh, hey, let's just take some elderflower. It's, I'm thinking, analyzing. I'm also understanding the pharmaceuticals they are taking. I'm also reading labs. It's like very, very intense when you work with an herbalist. So one of the sad things is on Instagram, and I love Instagram. I would love for people to follow me at Sara Chana S without an H. It's SARACHANAS. I try to put up one little 1-minute videos on botanical medicine, but a lot of women go to, weekend courses. They become an aromatherapist. They like hire someone to do PR, and they have really great videos on Instagram, and people believe them. So I think it's really important to work with an herbalist that's like has a lot of education, really works. Like I have a little MP3 player that I carry with me because I don't always like to be on my phone. And every couple months, I put a new 150 videos on it. I mean, audio lectures. I listen to cardiologists, radiologists. I'm listening to people that are specializing in diabetes besides herbalists, because I need to be up on everything. So if you're going to work with an herbalist, make sure they really have education and that they're familiar with the current research that's going on, because allopathic conventional medicine is phenomenal. Right. I love an MRI. Please go get an MRI. I love a CAT scan. Please do me a favor. Get me an X-ray. Get me some blood tests, because why not use what allopathic medicine is so proficient at to help me understand a client?
Right. And what do you think some of the weaknesses of allopathic medicine are? It's okay to say it, by the way.
Well, one of the biggest weaknesses is the lack of continuously of care, meaning you go into a practice, you don't know, especially with pediatricians, whether you're seeing the PA, the MD, and has this MD ever seen this child before? So that's a big problem, because when I see a child develop, because I'm a lactation consultant, I see them at 2 days old, then I see them at 3 months. Then they come into me if they get fluid in their ears at 6 months. Then they come to me when they're teething. I see this child and I understand their norm. You see, health is not what Instagram and Facebook says it is. Health is your DNA, your genetics, your financial situation, because we know in clinical studies that wealthier people can stay healthier. They can get more help. They can get healthier food. They get more cleaning help. They can go to a spa. They can get a massage. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. So what happens is when you went with allopathic conventional care is, I know you guys are limited to about 7 minutes. You can't spend the time. You have to, in your 7 minutes, take a history, do a diagnosis, see what's going on, maybe even call it into the pharmacy and write up your notes.
And struggle with the electronic records the entire time with your face in the computer. I mean, some people have more time. I'm fortunate to have more than 7 minutes, but it's nowhere near enough.
Well, I had an MD come and shadow me, and she said in the clinic she was in an acute care, and she said she was getting reprimanded because she spent more than 7 minutes per patient. They were going to dock her pay. And she came into me crying after 2 days of shadowing me. She said, Sara Chana, what is this? And I said, I couldn't even fathom making any I don't want to say diagnosis because herbalists are not allowed to diagnose. And that's why I like to work with doctors, let them diagnose and I can treat. But sometimes they get the wrong diagnosis. I'll give a perfect example. I had a client in my office just 24 hours ago. Won't say who the name is. 22, pregnant. Well, she came to me afterwards to work with lactation. She didn't pass her first sugar test. She didn't. She's 22 years old. She's not heavy. She didn't pass her first sugar test. Then she did barely pass the 3-hour test. She did, but barely. So I looked at her and I said, well, what did your doctor tell you that you need to do during your 1 to 2 years of breastfeeding to prevent becoming gestational diabetic? She goes, nothing. I said, well, wait a minute. If we know you're 22 and you're thin and you're already having trouble passing that test, what is going on? What are you going to do? She goes, I have no idea. So I'm like, okay. We know now that if you have gestational diabetes, the studies are showing that you will become diabetic later on in life. That means as a practitioner, we need to do everything in our power to prevent that from happening. So I took another 45 minutes, went over her food plan, spoke to her about how important it is to exercise. And I gave her some supplements to try to make sure that she keeps her blood sugar level stable. Her pancreas is working up to its peak. And I took a history. Does your mother have diabetes? Does your grandmother have diabetes? Does your mother's sisters? So that she had a handle and could take responsibility with her physician to try to stay healthy. That's what I feel is missing.
That's amazing. See, that's amazing. My preventative heart is bursting with joy.
Yay.
And that's why I keep pushing for these kind of conversations, because I'm not fixing medicine. You're not fixing modern medicine. The patient listening to this is not fixing modern medicine. Halavai, we should all get together, right? And put money into prevention and mental health care and nutrition. And I lie awake at nights on this, but putting that aside, I want to partner with people who care and can spend that time. And that's why I'm reaching across the divide for people who do want to partner. Not everybody does, but I will point out that when we say 80% of the world's population uses herbal medicine, we're not talking about going to an herbalist here. We're not.
Well,
we're talking
they do have herbalists in smaller countries and smaller towns. There usually was the wise woman. There was the Indian man or the wise work or a wise woman. There were always mentors that would teach, explain, and continue the custom. So
yeah, but when I talk about the 80% of the population right now and say 42% in the United States, those 42% in the United States are primarily not going to an herbalist. And the reason that I'm pointing this out is that I think when people hear herbal medicine, they think they can reach into, a shelf in CVS or whatever, or buy it online and it'll be safe and effective and it's like harmless. And I want to make sure we talk about that there are risks with herbal medicine.
Well, I think everybody should either read a book like my book, Moodtopia, where I do speak about herbs in depth and I give a lot of information about herbal medicine. I think it's important to follow people like myself on our websites where we do give information. And I think that education is vital. Like when people come to me, I'm just going to tell you something. I had a client again in my office as a lactation consultant, and she had spent 9 months with her OB. She saw him at least once a month in the first 7 months. Then she sees the OB more regularly in the 7th to 8th month. And then in the 9th month, you see the OB every week. So I was just doing an experiment, and this is not to put down doctors, God forbid. Some of my best friends are doctors. My son's in medical school, my daughter-in-law. So I said to her to begin, because I was in one of my moods, I said, please tell me 3 things your OB taught you during 15 visits. She said, I said, just 3 insights about your pregnant body, your bladder, anything. She paused, and it was a pregnant pause, right? Pause. So she said, Sara Chana, I don't remember him teaching me anything. So I said, great. Okay. All right. So she had an 1.5-hour consult with me, breastfeeding, postpartum, birth, bleeding, blah. So at the end of it, I said, can you tell me 5 things you learned today? She goes, can I tell you 15? So when you ask the question of where is the breakdown of allopathic medicine, part of it is empowering the patients to understand their challenges, their diabetes, their high blood pressure, their cholesterol, understanding their DNA genetic. We see your mother struggled with weight. We see your father had some diabetic sores. We have lost that belief, understanding that empowering our patients is important.
It is, but I will say that this breaks my heart and crushes my soul, because this is not intrinsic to allopathic medicine. It is the way medicine is practiced in our country right now, which has nothing to do with the way medicine was created to be practiced. It's basically the corporate model. All right.
Right.
I could cry about it all day. But, doctors want to do this, and this is what causes what we call burnout or moral injury. But putting that aside, I'm doing the best I can by trying to bring people in who can spend more time and do these things. We all want to do them. And someday maybe we'll be empowered. The doctors will be empowered to empower the patients. I know I try to in every spare minute I have, just so you should know.
Right. No, you're doing a great job, and this podcast is great. You told me before not to feel bad if I put down. So I just wanted to say my observation.
Right. It's not the doctors, it's the system. I just want to make sure the system is failing us, not the doctors, please.
Right.
Make it clear.
Right. No, I agree, because I even have doctors that come to me.
Right.
And they sit in my office and they're like so intimidated because they need to know everything. And I have a lot of OB nurses that come to me and they sit there and they're like, Sara Chana, I feel so stupid. I'm like, oh, no, you're going to be brilliant in an hour. And they look at me and they go, this is not hard. So again, we're not changing medicine today. Nope. And, here's what I tell my clients all the time. Okay. This is a perfect example. So I love emergency medicine in America. I think it's phenomenal. And this is how I look at it. God forbid someone has a stroke and they end up in the emergency room. There is a protocol that everybody's going to do. So it's not like the nurse says, well, maybe we should try this. And the doctor goes, I don't know. Maybe we should try this. And the nurse said, I just read an interesting study. No. I love that in emergency care, everybody works as a team. As an outsider looking in, it is the most phenomenal coming together of brilliant souls trying to heal than anywhere on the planet. But then, after the crisis, the heart attack, the stroke, the diabetic, then you have to stop and look at the person and say, okay, Johnny in room 2 had a stroke and Linda in room 5 had a stroke. Johnny's going to need different post-care than Linda. And how do we make sure that Johnny knows how to prevent this again, and Linda? And the way they will then heal will be different, and how to prevent it will then be different. And that's where herbalists shine. We shine. Don't have me in an emergency room. Okay, I could help you in an emergency room. I would be a team player and I would follow, because I would say, I don't know this as well. You tell me what to do. But after, that's where herbalists are trained. We're trained to know the pharmaceuticals, know the disease, know the physiology, the anatomy. I have to know that. People don't understand that that's what herbalists need to know. Really, to be a master herbalist, that's what we need to know. Besides the action of the plant and the action of the pharmaceutical, to try to understand if there's not a clinical study, is the action of the plant going to be contraindicated, or is it going to work beautifully together? But that's one of the problems, and that's why you're having this podcast. So physicians who are very well trained in what the areas that they are need to start really looking at people as individuals rather than the herd outlook.
So interesting. I think also if you're looking at prevention from the beginning, not just prevention of another recurrence of something from the emergency room, but keeping people healthy, that's a whole other focus. And I don't think, unfortunately, we are as good at that for not intrinsic again to doctors, but to the way the system is set up. And there's also the whole siloization where everybody goes to one specialist, then another specialist, they don't talk to each other. So, there's a lot of problems, and just being able to spend that hour and a half, which you think is not enough compared to, 10, 15 minutes, is really, really invaluable. And to be able to work with the physician so they can do what they can do, and you have so much to contribute. And that's putting aside, how herbal medications work on different levels. By the way, there's different levels of working. Right. I mean, there's a whole conversation.
There's acute and chronic.
Right.
We have an acute situation and we have a chronic, and there will be different herbs and different plants and different dosages for an acute versus a chronic. Yes, correct.
I was thinking also along the lines of, some people will say, oh, it's placebo. So even if you did something and it was a quote unquote placebo effect, that shouldn't be dismissed, because if you help a person get better, even if it was technically a placebo, I'm not misbelieving or disbelieving. I'm just saying, I'm just looking at that from that perspective. I think we underestimate the power of just plain healing, however you get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Except that I like to see in a blood test if things are improving. I like to see in an MRI if things are improving. So, do I think that the psyche has a big effect? Yeah. There's all the clinical studies that just by people telling their story lowers their cortisol stress hormones and releases dopamine and serotonin.
Right.
We know that.
Right.
So we know that. So is that placebo? No, it's changing a chemical response in your body. Placebo, it's changing.
Right. Yeah. But see, placebo doesn't mean there's no change. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
I'm saying the body can heal itself. What is the mechanism of it?
I mean, I
can find measurable changes from things that might be what so-called placebo. I think we underestimate what the placebo does.
Right. But let's say I'm going to give an herb called yerba santa. Yerba santa is a plant that helps thin the mucus in the body. So we know that if we have thick mucus in the sinuses, the tissue, the homeopathic word is called boggy tissue. The tissue is going to be softer, less firm, unable to move the mucus, right? And if I have a client that's going to get sinus surgery and there's just mucus, this client is blowing their nose and it's filling right back up, and they're blowing their nose and it's filling right back up. And they take an herb called yerba santa for 6 weeks, and they go back to their doctor, and the doctor's like, wow, there's like 50% less mucus here, and it's just not thick anymore. I don't know what you're doing, but it's working. I can't see that being placebo, especially if the client comes in like this. I don't think herbal medicine is going to work.
Right. But when we're talking about placebo, I think we're not talking about this in the same way.
Right.
When I say the word placebo, I mean you have given something that hasn't directly physiologically caused the change, that other things have caused the change, but that doesn't mean there are no changes. In other words,
but I believe that yerba santa, I hear you, but I believe yerba santa is changing the viscosity of that mucus. Meaning,
it might be.
And I don't know if it's placebo. For instance, when I have a client, that's what I'm giving you. For instance,
right.
I have a client that's like, my husband wants me to come. You're cheaper than the copay of surgery. I don't believe in herbal medicine. You help my sister with her sinus. Nothing I've done has worked, but I'm here. And I give her yerba santa with a couple other herbs. And 8 weeks later, her sinuses are better. So usually placebo, there has to be some kind of a belief a little bit that this can work. I have so many non-believers, like I've been constipated, Sara Chana, for 25 years. I've got hemorrhoids the size of, footballs coming out my bottom. You're not going to help me, but I don't know what else to do. And all of a sudden their hemorrhoids shrink a bit. These are clients that have already had 2 or 3 surgeries. So I hear the placebo, but I still, as an herbalist, believe that even if you don't believe it's going to help or even want it to help, I believe the action on the plants will change the physiology of the body.
Oh, it could. It could. I'm challenging you.
That's okay.
I'm challenging
That's
you,
what
but
I
I think
yeah.
I think also, and I'm not saying I don't believe, I don't know. And I think that I'd rather just stay humble and say, I don't know. I don't know, but I think healing is so, so complex. And what I'm trying to say is I wish people wouldn't say, oh, it's just a placebo. There's people who study placebo and how to use it. People say you can get placebo effect without believing. So that's not necessarily true that you have to believe. It's very interesting. It's a whole other study. Maybe someday I'll find somebody who specializes in placebo and interview them on that. But no, herbs are not necessarily inert at all. And I think people sometimes confuse them with, again, homeopathy is a whole separate, but you could say that homeopathy is different than herbal medicine in the sense, maybe you want to explain because you know both better than I do.
Well, I do. I wanted to say though, that if we have like a 6-year-old kid with high lead levels, okay, and I'm going to give him an herb mix. One of the herbs I would put in there is ground. 2 of the herbs would be ground ivy and cilantro in tincture or liquid form. This is a tincture, a liquid for those of you out there that can see it. And those of you who are not, it's liquid. And this is a 6-year-old kid, has no idea. I mean, his mother could give him a lollipop, some oatmeal, or these little drops, and their lead levels go down. They go down. It's amazing. You see what I'm saying? So I believe that if we had more money in these clinical studies on herbs, that we would see their action in the body is real and complete and long-lasting and long-term beneficial. We just don't have the finances right now.
Yeah, I want to give you a chance to tell your echinacea story because I've heard you tell it. But before we get to your echinacea story, because I love that one and it's so interesting to me, I do want to say about lead. You're still seeing children with lead levels? Because
sometimes, not as often as I did 15 years ago. I'm in New York. There are old apartment buildings. They haven't all taken care of it. Certainly not as often as I used to, but yeah, occasionally we still get high lead. Yeah.
Yeah. I recommend people be really careful and go over that with their pediatricians, please. I haven't worked in Brooklyn in a while. That's the last time I saw it. I work on Long Island and we just don't see it anymore.
We have old buildings and there is paint that
the pre-war. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, you work closely with pediatricians. We're not talking about doing something without working with the pediatricians.
I want the levels before and after. And if they're not improving, then we go to another modality.
Yeah.
I just see, look, we have to know the compliance of the parents. When we're dealing with pediatrics, kids are not going up there and taking it themselves. So, sometimes parents can comply and sometimes they can't. And you have to give herbs 2 to 3 times a day for anywhere from 6 to 8 months to see the improvement that we need. It's not like a one-shot deal. It's not like, boom, put a magic pill in your mouth and things get better. They have to give it consistently. The body has to integrate it and change the dis-ease into a healthy state.
Right. I'd also want to find out where that lead's coming from and get rid of it. That's a separate.
For
I'm
sure.
sure you feel the same thing. I know you don't disagree.
Of course.
Echinacea is I've heard you tell the story, and you were talking about studies and how hard it is to fund. And I want to hear your echinacea story again.
It's funny. I've moved on, but I remember. So
yeah.
I can't remember if it was 15 years ago. I should have the study in front of me. I apologize. There was a big study on echinacea all over the news, CNN, Fox. It was everywhere that the clinical study was done, and it was performed at Harvard University. And they said that echinacea does not shorten the duration of a cold or flu. It does not lessen the symptoms. And they just totally disproved in this study that echinacea did nothing. So I'm like, what? Like really? How could that be? So I went and found the original study, which was actually, I had to pay through a website to get the actual study. And it went like this. It was conducted at Harvard University, but a pharmaceutical company had, of course, rented out Harvard. That's the way they get money and funding. They make money. We use their lab. When they gave the echinacea, they gave it in capsule pill form as opposed to liquid tincture form. We know that with echinacea, it's much more effective, much better results if you give it in liquid tincture form. When you just take the root and dry it, it could be not dried properly, it could stay out on the shelf too long, and the study did not tell the patients what the dosage is. They did not change the dosage for a male and female. And you and I could talk for hours about all the clinical studies that were done on men that didn't apply to women. That was a big thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got a 6'4" guy and you've got a 5'1" girl. She weighs 98 on a good day and he weighs, 278. Obviously, the dosage is going to be different. And in the study, they also said that they could take Dimetapp or Benadryl. This was before we had Claritin, or Sudafed, Actifed. Do you remember these medicines? For any of their cold symptoms. So this was a 100 million% bogus study, because if I was in charge of the study, if someone hired me, I would adjust the dosage for the weight, age, metabolism of the person in front of me. They would get it in liquid form. I would tell them how often to take the echinacea, and I would tell them, please stay away from a Sudafed, Dimetapp, and let's see what the results are. So it was not a legitimate study. It got played everywhere. So as a consumer, we have to really also look into, is this a legitimate study? Was it set up properly?
Right. I think that we have to be an equal opportunity skeptic, right?
Yes,
would you say that's
absolutely.
Fair?
Yes, love that.
Yeah. But you know what? Again, people aren't getting echinacea from, suspensions from these vials for the vast majority. They're going to CVS and they're getting like a capsule of it.
Well, then we can talk for a quick moment about capsules versus tincture. Mm-hmm. Tincture, which I'm going to show for those of you watching on YouTube and those of you just listening, we'll have to just imagine. Mm-hmm. We take an herb just in its form, whether it's the leaf, the seed, the root. We just take the herb. I'm showing some herbs. Beautiful. We've got a pink one, a yellow one, a purple one. Gorgeous. We pour grain alcohol over the herb in a glass jar so that it can sit in this glass for 6 to 8 weeks. And then we strain it and we have what is called a tincture. And a tincture is a liquid that is the most effective, because here's an example. You go to the store, you have a recipe for this phenomenal dip with parsley. You take it out of the store, it's green, it's crisp, it looks beautiful. You leave it in your fridge because you're too tired to make it that day. 2 days later, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to use the parsley. You take the parsley out of the fridge. It's already limp. It's turning yellow. And the next day it turns like a white and you got this limp parsley. When you take a plant out of the ground, it loses its vitality, its vitamins and nutrients, and its essential oils very, very, very quickly. So we as herbalists, we like a fresh plant to the best of our ability. We take that plant fresh when it's got all its vitality. We put it in the grain alcohol. So we extract all the components of the plant at its height. When you take herbs in capsule form, they've been sitting on the shelf for 2 years, 3 years. Maybe they dried it indoors, maybe not out in the sun. And here's another huge problem. First of all, a tincture liquid has a 10-year shelf life. Pharmaceutical companies are not so happy to hear that I can make one batch of lemon balm, which is antiviral from the mint family, good for children and adults, helps calm nervous people down. And if you're exposed to a cold or virus, go ahead and take some lemon balm. But the problem is with the capsules is that you can adulterate it and mix it with a filler. So we know in America, turmeric, which is primarily grown in India, is a vibrant orange color when we powder it. But if I mix it with rice flour, I can double and triple my batch of turmeric, because the turmeric is going to dye the rice powder this gorgeous orange. So we as herbalists, us educated ones, know that powdered turmeric is basically colored rice flour. It's not going to be effective. So in my office, we use a turmeric where I have someone that squeezes and presses the turmeric plant, and we put it in an oil because it keeps its vitality. And we have a turmeric oil with no rice flour in it. So that's one of the problems with getting herbs in capsules, because they're mixed with other things to extend and make more money.
So you make your own products?
I don't. I can. I live in Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn, I do actually very fun. If anybody's in the Brooklyn area, I do in the spring weed walks, and that's not marijuana weed. And we go through the streets of Brooklyn and we find medicinal plants growing through the cracks of the concrete, in between broken down abandoned cars. But I make sure for my clients that I'm getting a product where I know the herbalist. Now, what people don't understand, when you get herbal medicine from real places, real herbalists, you have a master herbalist identifying the plant, because if I show you skullcap, you don't know if it's skullcap or mint or spearmint. How are you going to know the difference? Then we have a chemist checking it for pesticides and lead. And there are chemists at every single lab testing and making sure that it's the proper genus and that the quality is a good quality. So here's the bottom line. I'm going to order some kava from the Philippines. That's where the best kava grows. The kava comes to me, it's been on a ship, it's been on a plane, and I look at it and it's like dried out. It's like the root doesn't have vitality anymore. It was picked at the wrong time. It wasn't packaged properly, and I have this kava. Well, I'm going to send it back because I'm not going to make it into medicine, but someone's going to buy that kava. That distributor is not going to take it as a loss. Oh, sorry, we picked it too early. We picked it too late. They're going to sell it to another company who's going to say, oh, I'll buy it at 50% off. The distributor is going to go, oh, great. How great. Here, take it. So when you work with reputable brands, people, you always want to call the company and make sure a master herbalist is overseeing the production. And you want to make sure there's a chemist there checking for pesticides and lead and other impurities. And then you can feel confident that you have a good product. That's why I don't buy my herbs, and we don't want to put down CVS or Walgreens, but that's not where I'm going to purchase my herbs for my clients, especially not turmeric.
Right. I mean, but it's also completely different. It's like you said, these are capsule forms. They don't have little bottles. Do they have little bottles of herbal stuff at CVS?
Some of them, yeah, they're coming to the market more and more. So the question is, what plants can be used in capsules? So if I have a plant like dandelion leaf, it's a food herb that will maintain okay in capsules. I'm not against that. But what herbal companies are now trying to do is take the tincture, the liquid form, put it in a veggie cap. So there's the liquid in the veggie cap, because we are a society, we don't drink tea. This is not teetotaling Americans by nature, other places in the world. So people want them in capsules. So herbalists are trying to accommodate what people need, but I'm still a tincture gal because it works, it's efficient, and I know the process well.
Right. And again, I really want to point out that there can be so much danger here when you buy stuff over the counter. You don't always know what you're getting.
Right. So it's important. I'm a master herbalist. There are many master herbalists in the United States and abroad that will openly tell you their education. They'll tell you, now, I don't produce products. Some I'll make if I'm upstate New York or somewhere where it's beautiful and clean, but usually I'll give that to my family and friends, not my clients. But it's important to start reading some articles, understanding. I mean, as you said before, herbalists should give lectures at every single medical school, because herbal medicine, especially after our most recent pandemic, people are reaching for alternatives. People are seeing alternative practitioners. And I think it's important for MDs to begin to open the conversation, ask questions, and learn a little bit about it. There's a guy named Jonathan Treasure that wrote a book on botanical medicine, basically for physicians. He talks about drug-herbal interaction. He specializes in cancer, and he helps people that are going through radiation and chemo take herbs to prevent the side effects that are associated with chemo and radiation. So he's not an herbalist that's going to say, and there's a guy named Donald Yance, write down his name, Donald Yance, Yance. Donald Yance also specializes in cancer treatment. He knows every different chemo, every different type of radiation, all the newest medications that are going on for cancer patients, and then they will come up with a protocol to prevent the burning hands, burning feet, thyroid that becomes underactive, a lot of the side effects, the terrible metallic taste, the lack of appetite. So we as herbalists want desperately to work with allopathic MDs. We want to. It's like our dream.
Like these Treasure and Yance work with them?
They will talk to any MD. They have all the research. And Jonathan Treasure, I believe, got a PhD from England in botanical medicine. And a lot of the herbalists were botanists and chemists. And they, unlike me, who is not a chemist, can tell you the structure of the herb under a microscope. So we have all that information out there. It's just not been given to the public yet, but we have it.
Right. I mean, I see a lot of big cancer places have integrative medicine, which is amazing. Right. Which is amazing because we have phenomenal treatments that save lives, but there's also adverse effects at the same time. Right. And
yes,
side effects.
I had a pediatric client, and she had a cancer of the pituitary gland, not an easy one. And she was going through chemo, radiation. I was young and dumb. This is many, many, many moons ago. And she was at a clinic, and when you're at the clinic, you end up seeing the same parents, the same kids, your schedule, you become a group, which is, always helpful to have that supportive. And we were doing complementary herbal and homeopathic medicine at the same time. And she felt really embarrassed, the mom, because her kid didn't lose her hair. Her kid's appetite stayed up. And you could say, okay, it's just the genetics, DNA of this girl. But the mother knew it was the complementary medicine she was doing with the chemo. She was working with someone like me that's not going to say, okay, I can treat cancer. It's very interesting because there's an MD and her name popped out of my mind. I will try to remember it. She gave, to find it. She gave a lecture for herbalists, and she's also a master herbalist and an MD. And she said, we as herbalists need to know what we can and cannot treat. Mm-hmm. You need to know that. Don't lie to people. Don't give them false hope. And in herbal medicine, we also tell our clients, I don't know that this can be cured. We can help palliate the symptoms, right? That might be worth every penny. Right. We like to tell our clients when they should begin to see results, or maybe they're only going to get 40% better. I don't know, right? We don't know. But this doctor was saying, don't tell patients we can cure cancer. Herbalists do not know how to cure cancer. We don't. So if you have an herbalist that says they can cure cancer, run in the opposite direction. What we as herbalists can do is work with the oncologist and suggest some ideas so the patients, as I said before, keep up their appetite, don't have as many side effects. So real trained herbalists are not going to make promises that they can't keep.
Right. That's really important because, you can understand why someone would go to an alternative practitioner when they're suffering from something like cancer. But everything interacts, yes. Right? You could be making it worse while you're trying to make it better. And that's why that interaction with the allopathic doctors is so incredibly important. And people need to tell their doctors, I'm taking this. I mean, it is very common for people not to tell their doctors the alternative stuff. And I'll remember a time with my own daughter, my daughter with autism, and I was having her prepared for her tonsil surgery, and they asked for medication she's on. And when I got to omega-3, they said, oh, no, I don't want to hear about that stuff. And whatever other supplements she was on. Wrong. Omega-3 can make you bleed for longer. She's going for surgery. You need to know that. Right? So
Yes.
that communication has to happen, and the respect has to happen.
I think doctors, from my experience, are embarrassed that they don't know. My experience, I think that doctors are intimidated because we hold them on high pedestals of knowing more than the average person. And I understand why a doctor says, oh, no, don't do it, because they don't know anything about it. What they need to do, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is they need to speak with some real herbalists, see what they have to say, see whether you think they're articulate, knowledgeable, see what some of the data they're going to present is. But again, that takes time. And doctors are busy and rushed and seeing so many clients.
It's really, really hard. I also include in my resources a resource from the NIH, Herbs at a Glance, which I think can be really helpful, because I know somebody comes in with a pile of stuff. I can't call up an herbalist. I mean, maybe now I can.
Now you can. Absolutely. Now you
speed
can.
Dial. No, but you know what I'm saying? Like we need to have an easy resource, and they make it so easy on that particular site. So I'm going to include that. For patients, for physicians, I think it's a good resource.
And there's a publication called Herbal Gram. And Herbal Gram is something you should put in as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
Herbal Gram, the name of the man, I can picture his face. He consolidates all the research that's going on in the world on herbal medicine, and he includes links to it. And he's a phenomenal research, Herbal Gram. And amazing. You can subscribe to it, very inexpensive. They used to have a paper magazine that came out. Maybe they stopped it, although I used to love to have something in my hand. And so I think there's more resources out there than MDs think.
American Botanical Council.
Yes, amazing. Does it say who runs it? Not Michael Tierra. You may not catch his name quickly. I know.
Now you're asking me a hard question.
Well, that's okay. He's a very brilliant man. He has a lot of podcasts on the internet that doctors can listen to. And he really explains the studies, how they're presented, whether they're legitimate studies or not, what the outcome is. He's really great. It's a great resource.
I will include that in the notes. We never talked about all the other things you do that's part of Moodtopia, which is the name of this talk. I feel terrible.
We're just going to have to do another one, you see, for sure.
We're going to have to do part 2. It's 9:00. I don't think we have time, but people can read your book. I love it because you're real mind body. I mean, again, when I say placebo, I am not dismissing in any way. I do it. I look at it in a different way. I look at it as a way of healing.
Right.
So much of the medication, if you look at the for a lot of conditions we have, say, for example, migraine, the placebo rate is very high, and the medication, when it's approved, will be barely above placebo.
Right.
All right. So I don't think we should dismiss placebo. However you get better is how you get better. But also, people should not misunderstand herbal medicine as inert in and of itself. That's wrong.
No, it's just not. And again, when you spoke in the beginning about 80% of the world, that's according to the WHO, the World Health Organization, has done a lot of research on botanical medicine use throughout the world. I do know, reiterating what we discussed, is that in these communities, there was always a wise woman or a medicine man that would teach the community how to use the plants. So, and what I really see, which is phenomenal, and then I want to mention that I do have a giveaway download that people, if they email me, will get a copy of. But, you know, it's 2:00 in the morning and your child wakes up crying and the child a couple weeks ago had an ear infection, and you think it's another ear infection, and you give your child the Tylenol and they spit it out because they don't feel well. There are so many comfort things you can do with herbs. If a child has a fever, you can take some peppermint essential oil, dilute it in a lotion, massage the child's feet and back, and it will lower the temperature, but allow the fever to be there, because we know that a fever is a blessing. Of course, we're making sure the child's drinking and urinating, but it'll cool the child off so they feel better. There's so many comfort tools that herbalists know, because at 2:00 in the morning, it's like this. Either the mother's panicking, oh my gosh, Charlie has another ear infection. What am I going to do? Do I go to acute care at 2:00 in the morning? Oh my gosh. Obviously, if it's an emergency, you go. But if it's another round and the mother has some oils that they can put behind the ear, not inside the ear, because we want to make sure it's not a busted eardrum. If we can give them an essential oil to breathe in, or an herb to take internally, or a homeopathic remedy, my clients tell me that they feel so empowered to know what to do in the interim of when they're getting to see that MD to get a diagnosis. And that's also something that herbalists can really give. Herbalists are never going to say, don't go to the doctor and get a diagnosis. What about you're at an airport, you're running on an airplane, your kid all of a sudden starts throwing up. Are you going to miss the flight? You can give them a little bit of cinnamon. It'll calm the stomach down. In clinical studies, cinnamon can kill E. coli bacteria. Again, you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to check the stool, but maybe some cinnamon will be able to get you from point A to point B. This is what herbalists like to do, is empower parents about their kids and empower adults for themselves, giving them tools. And I think that's really important.
I love it. I love it so much. I'm also going to add, as a pediatrician, that we like you to run stuff by us. Like, for example, certain essential oils can be, especially for very small babies, can be bad for their lungs, for example.
Sure.
I mean, there's lots of little caveats that you might have. The smaller the child, the bigger the deal that could be. But I love the idea of empowering parents to be able to do stuff on their own that's safe and could really be helpful
when they're waiting to get to you. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. So if you don't mind me mentioning, if anybody wants to email me at dstressherbs@gmail.com, that's de-stress, DESTRESS, herbs with an S @gmail, then I will send them a free little download that they can print and put on the refrigerator with just some little herbal tips that they can just have in the back of their mind. They don't even have to use them. And if you forget that, you can sign up with your email on my website, which is sarachana.com. Or you can just Google Sara Chana Silverstein and find my website. But I'm happy to share that, because I feel like when we have these podcasts, there's like so much information. It's like, oh my gosh, even when I was like you're panicking to write things down. So at least there'll be a little synopsis with just a couple little tips and little ideas.
Sure, we can share this in the show notes.
Sure. Excellent.
This is amazing. I have to thank you so much. This was worth the wait. It was really fun.
Excellent. I'm looking forward. Your questions were great. They were honest. They were real. And I feel like you're not the only MD that's asking these questions and inquisitive and wanting to know some answers about botanical plant-based medicine. So I'm looking forward to part 2, where we can delve in, and maybe we can even teach about, maybe we can find like 4 or 5 plants to talk a little bit in depth about, so that doctors can say, oh, I know a little bit about linden, lemon balm, and skullcap. They don't have to use it yet. They don't have to advocate for it, but it won't be so scary to them if they learn the action, the genus of it, and know how we use it.
I have one more question. Where can people get these particular tinctures?
So I'm going to mention some tinctures that I do not represent them. They are not, I don't represent the companies. But we have 3 herbal companies in the market in the States. We have a wonderful one also in Israel that I love. In the States, it's called Herb Farm, HERBPHARM. And they do now give monthly workshops. The next one I love is called Herbalist and Alchemist. and it's spelled just like it sounds, Herbalist and Alchemist. You can find them online. And the last one I would share is called Wish Garden Herbs. I know the people that manufacture the herbs. I know the herbalists that are involved in these 3 brands. And these are the herbs that I would with much confidence say that these products are safe, non-toxic. They are the plants they say that they are, and there's no additives, lead, or pesticides.
That's amazing. But again, these can interact with other medications people are taking. It may depend, on your child's age. I do recommend working with your physician. I do.
Absolutely. But again, if we talk about an herb like lemon balm down the line at our next interview, that's an herb that is safe with about 99% of medications. There's an herb called linden. So there's an herb called nettles. So there are a handful of herbs that any physician can feel totally confident about having their patients use it. And then there are other herbs that we're going to question and say, like wild indigo is not an herb I would give with all medications. Certainly pulsatilla is an herb that can be toxic. Mm-hmm. So every physician could learn 7 herbs. They could. If they want, they could learn these 7 herbs. One to help with fever. Doesn't mean you're not going to give Tylenol or Advil. One that can help with pain. One that can help with nasal congestion and fluid in the ears. One that can help break down the mucus in the lungs if a child has a croup or cough. So there are certain herbs that are really safe, but you have to know about them.
Absolutely. We have to do part 2. It's just no other way.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. And I look forward to interacting with a bunch of your listeners and trying to help share more knowledge with them.
You got it. Be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Joma Preventative Health Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share this with your friends. For more information, check out our Instagram at joma_org. Check out our website, www.joma.org, that's JOWMA.org, or email us at health@joma.org.